He found out I was sick on a Tuesday. He filed for divorce on a Thursday. He told his lawyer I was no longer a viable life partner. He told our daughter, Cassie, that Mommy was going to be away for a while. She was 9 years old, and she believed him because children believe the people who are supposed to protect them. I believed him once too. That was my first mistake, and it was the last one I ever made. My name is Eleanor Voss. I am 63 years old. I spent 31 of those years building a pharmaceutical licensing empire alongside a man I thought was my partner. A man who held my hand in the early days when we were eating ramen noodles in a studio apartment in Boston, calculating royalty structures on a legal pad while the radiator clanged and the pipes groaned. A man who kissed me on the forehead the morning I signed our first 7-figure licensing deal and said, "You did this, Ellie. You built this." He had a different vocabulary by the time the diagnosis came. The cancer was caught at stage 2. The prognosis was good. The doctors used words like manageable and treatable and full recovery. But Daniel Voss heard a different word. He heard burden. And somewhere between the oncologist's office and the parking garage, he made a decision. He decided that a wife in chemotherapy was not the brand he wanted to present to the world anymore. He had a new life he had been quietly assembling for 18 months. A younger woman named Tara, who taught hot yoga in Scottsdale and posted sunrise photos with captions about authentic living. He had been funding her authentic living with my company's money for a year and a half without me knowing. I found out the same way women always find out. A text message on a phone he left charging in our kitchen. I read it standing in my bathrobe at 6:30 in the morning, a cup of chamomile tea in my hand because I couldn't drink coffee anymore. The treatment made everything bitter. I read it, and I set the tea down very carefully on the granite counter, and I walked back to the bedroom, and I sat on the edge of my side of the bed, and I looked at the wall for a very long time. I did not cry. I was too tired for tears. I had spent 6 months being tired in a way that went all the way down to the bone, and there was nothing left for tears. But there was something left for clarity. When you are fighting something that wants to kill you, you develop a very precise relationship with what matters and what doesn't. What matters is your daughter. What matters is the thing you built. What matters is that when you walk out of this, you walk out whole. The divorce papers arrived 2 weeks later, delivered by a process server while I was sitting in the infusion chair at the oncology center, a needle in my arm and a heating pad on my lap. The nurse looked embarrassed on my behalf. I signed the acknowledgement of receipt and went back to reading my book. I was in the middle of a biography of Katharine Graham. It felt appropriate. Daniel wanted the house in Phoenix. He wanted the vacation property in Sedona. He wanted the vintage watch collection I had spent 15 years assembling because he said he had developed the taste for it during our marriage. He wanted full control of Vosslex, the pharmaceutical licensing company we had built together, arguing that his operational role in the last decade made him the primary contributor to its current valuation. His lawyer, a man named Gerald Webb, who wore French cuffs and never made eye contact, had prepared a valuation document that conveniently placed the company's worth at 30% below its actual market value. He wanted Cassie on a schedule that gave him weekends and summers and the appearance of an involved father while I did the school runs and the homework and the medical appointments. And he wanted me to stay quiet about Tara. I put the papers on the nightstand in our bedroom and I called my attorney, a woman named Patricia Cole, who was known in Phoenix legal circles as the woman who made the Sullivan case disappear. Patricia answered on the first ring because she had been expecting my call for 6 months. She had been expecting it since I first called her to ask a hypothetical question about pharmaceutical licensing structures and the legal separation of intellectual property from operational assets. That was 18 months ago, 14 months before Daniel filed. "Patricia," I said when she answered. "He filed." "I know," she said. "I have the service documents. Are you ready to execute?" I looked at the infusion bag hanging above me. The liquid was clear and cold, and it was saving my life. "I am ready," I said. "I need to explain something about the pharmaceutical licensing industry before I tell you what came next, because the trap I had built required understanding a very specific kind of asset. A pharmaceutical license is not a product. It is a right. It is a legal permission slip that allows a company to manufacture, distribute, or sell a compound or formulation that someone else invented. The value of a license is not in the building where it is administered. It is not in the employees who process the paperwork. It is in the intellectual property itself, the patents, the formulations, the registered trade secrets that give the license its teeth. Daniel understood the business side of Voslex. He understood contracts and client relationships and quarterly targets. What he did not understand, because I had made sure of it, was the underlying IP structure. 12 years ago, after my first marriage to a man named Robert had ended and taken a research startup with it, I had rebuilt from nothing with the discipline of someone who had been educated by catastrophe. When Daniel and I formed Voslex, I did something I told no one about. I quietly separated the operational company from its intellectual assets. I created a separate entity, a Delaware holding company registered under a name that meant nothing to anyone who didn't know what to look for. It was called Meridian IP Holdings. Meridian owned the core patents. Voslex paid Meridian a licensing fee for the right to use those patents. Daniel was the CEO of Voslex. He had never heard the name Meridian IP Holdings in his life. Every valuation his lawyers had produced, every asset estimate in the divorce petition, was based on the value of Voslex as a standalone operating company. It was the house without the foundation. It was the engine without the fuel. Without the license from Meridian, Voslex could not legally operate. The moment that license was withdrawn, the company was worth exactly the value of its office furniture and its client list. And Meridian's license agreement contained a clause on page 31, section 4, paragraph 9. In the event of a hostile transfer of operational control of the licensee company, Meridian retained the right to immediately terminate the license without penalty and without notice, reverting all IP rights to the parent entity. A hostile transfer. Like, for example, a divorce court awarding operational control to a party who was not the original founding IP holder. I had written that clause myself at 2 a.m. in a hotel room in Chicago after a licensing conference in 2011, while Daniel was at the hotel bar charming clients. I had written it because I had learned from Robert's divorce that people take the thing they can see and they forget to ask what makes it run. Gerald Webb had not read Meridian's licensing agreement. He had not found Meridian at all because Meridian was not listed anywhere in Voslex's public filings. It was a private holding entity with a Delaware registration and a registered agent address that appeared nowhere in Voslex's organizational documents. Patricia Cole had known about Meridian for 18 months. The mediation session was held in a glass conference room on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Phoenix, where everything was chrome and clean lines and designed to make you feel like you had already lost. Daniel arrived with Gerald Webb and 2 junior associates carrying banker's boxes. He was wearing a new suit. It was summer-weight charcoal, expensive and precise. He looked rested. He had the particular glow of a man who was sleeping well because he believed the outcome was already decided. He did not look at me when he sat down. He looked at the documents his team arranged on the glass table. He looked at his phone. He looked at the view through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He did not look at the woman sitting across from him who had held his hand when his father died, who had driven him home from the hospital at 3 a.m. when he had an appendix removed, who had whispered in his ear in a parking lot in Denver after their first major client signed that this was just the beginning, Daniel. This is only the beginning. Patricia sat beside me. She had a single yellow legal pad and a pen. No banker's boxes, no associates. She looked like she was about to take a lunch order. Gerald opened by presenting the asset division framework. He walked through the properties with confident choreography. The Phoenix house went to Daniel. The Sedona property went to Daniel. The watch collection, which he valued using a gemologist who had given a suspiciously conservative estimate, went to Daniel. Voslex, he said, folding his hands on the table with the satisfaction of a man laying down an unbeatable hand, would be awarded to Daniel Voss in its entirety, given his decade of operational leadership and Eleanor's diminished capacity due to her medical situation. Diminished capacity. That was the phrase. It sat in the room like something rotting. Patricia wrote something on her legal pad. She did not look up. Gerald continued. In exchange, Eleanor would receive a cash settlement of $1.2 million, full ownership of the Phoenix townhouse she had used as a personal workspace before moving into the main home, spousal support for a period of 36 months, and a minority stake of 15% in Voslex held in a non-voting capacity. 15% of a company I had founded. Non-voting. In the company that ran on patents I still owned. Daniel finally looked at me then. It was a brief look, practiced in its neutrality. He was checking to see if I was going to cry. He was checking to see if I was going to fall apart the way he had calculated I would, because I was tired and sick, and smaller than I had been a year ago, and he had decided that those things made me breakable. I looked back at him with the expression of a woman who had been planning this moment for 18 months. Patricia cleared her throat. She placed her pen down on the legal pad. She looked at Gerald Webb with the calm of a woman who has already won and is simply waiting for the paperwork to confirm it. She said, "Before we respond to the proposed framework, we need to introduce a document that will significantly alter the scope of this conversation." Gerald frowned. "What document?" Patricia opened the single folder she had brought. She removed a clean, stapled set of pages and slid them across the glass table toward Gerald. He picked them up. He read the header. His frown deepened. "Meridian IP Holdings," he read aloud. He looked up. "What is Meridian IP Holdings?" "It is the company that owns every patent, formulation, and registered trade secret that Voslex currently operates under," Patricia said pleasantly. "Without a valid license from Meridian, Voslex has no legal right to manufacture, distribute, or sublicense any of the compounds in its current portfolio. None of them, including the 3 compounds currently in active distribution agreements worth a combined $47 million in annual revenue." Gerald was very still. He was the kind of lawyer who prided himself on never showing surprise, but his jaw had tightened by a fraction, and the color had shifted in his face. He looked at Daniel. Daniel was staring at the papers. He was reading. His eyes moved quickly, the way eyes move when they are searching for an escape route. Patricia continued. "Meridian IP Holdings is solely owned by Eleanor Voss. It was incorporated in Delaware 12 years ago, 2 years before Voslex began operations, and has maintained a valid licensing agreement with Voslex throughout the company's history. The license agreement, which you now have a copy of, contains a termination clause on page 31. I would draw your attention specifically to Section 4, Paragraph 9. Gerald found the page. He read it. I watched his eyes stop moving. In the event of a hostile transfer of operational control, Patricia said, "Meridian retains the right to immediately terminate the license without penalty. If Voslex is awarded to Daniel Voss through this divorce proceeding, that award constitutes a hostile transfer. Eleanor can terminate the license the same day. Voslex's entire operational portfolio collapses overnight." Daniel put the papers down. He looked at me. For the first time in a long time, he actually looked at me. "What is this?" he said. His voice was quiet in a way that was not calm. "This is a prior condition," I said. "This is what Voslex runs on. This is the thing you never asked about." "You hid this," he said. "You hid an entire company." "It is in Delaware's public business registry," I said. "Gerald could have found it in a title search." He didn't look. Gerald opened his mouth. Patricia raised one finger. "I would advise you not to speak right now, Gerald," she said. "You are in the middle of understanding your exposure." Gerald closed his mouth. "I want to be clear," Patricia continued, setting her hands flat on the table. "Eleanor is not seeking to destroy Voslex. She has no interest in terminating the license and watching the company dissolve. She built it. She cares about the employees and the client relationships. What she is proposing is the following. Eleanor retains operational and ownership control of Voslex, including the Meridian license, which is its functional heart. Daniel will receive the Sedona property, the watch collection, a cash settlement of $900,000, and a non-voting 15% stake in Voslex held in a managed trust for a period of 5 years, after which it will be bought out at fair market value. She paused. And primary custody of Cassie goes to Eleanor, with generous and consistent visitation for Daniel. Daniel stood up. He put both hands on the glass table. His new suit pulled slightly at the shoulders. He said my name the way men say the names of women they think they can still intimidate. Eleanor. I did not flinch. I had been through 6 months of chemotherapy. I had learned that the human body can absorb almost anything and keep going. Sit down, Daniel, I said. He did not sit down. He looked at Gerald. Tell her she can't do this, he said. Tell her this is fraud. Gerald looked at the papers. Then he looked at me. His voice was careful and bloodless. When was Meridian incorporated? 12 years ago, I said. And Voslex's operating license from Meridian, when was it first executed? 11 years and 8 months ago, I said. 2 months before Voslex took on its first client. Gerald was quiet for a long moment. He gathered the Meridian documents very precisely into a neat stack. He set them to the side with the deliberate movements of a man controlling his breathing. Then he leaned toward Daniel and spoke in a voice that was meant to be private, but was perfectly audible in the quiet room. The clause is clean, Daniel. If they execute the termination, we have nothing to take. There is no Voslex without the license. He paused. She has us. Daniel looked at me across the table. He looked at me the way he had not looked at me in 2 years, with full attention, with the recognition that the woman across from him was not the diminished and breakable thing he had decided she was. You planned this, he said. I was very still. I had learned stillness from the infusion chair. I had learned that the quietest things in a room carry the most mass. I planned for contingencies, I said. I have been planning for contingencies since Robert took my first company. I built a foundation that no one could touch because I have been in a room before where everything I built was taken from me, and I promised myself it would never happen again. He sat down. Slowly, the way men sit when the weight of a miscalculation settles onto their shoulders. Patricia slid the settlement proposal across the table, the revised one, the one that had my name on top. He signed it 3 days later. His attorney advised him there was no alternative. The termination clause was airtight. Without the Meridian license, Voslex was a letterhead. He took the property and the watches and the cash and the non-voting stake, and he took them quietly because the alternative was walking away with legal fees and a collapsed company. The custody arrangement he did not contest. When Patricia put the primary custody designation in front of him, he signed it without the negotiation she had prepared for. I think somewhere underneath the calculation and the new suit and the yoga instructor in Scottsdale, some part of him understood that Cassie deserved better than a courtroom argument about her schedule. Or perhaps he simply knew when he had run out of moves. I do not want to make Daniel Voss into a cartoon. He was not a monster. He was a man who made a series of choices that compounded in the direction of self-preservation until they crushed the people closest to him. He was afraid of illness and afraid of loss and afraid of being tethered to something he could not control. Those are human fears. They are not excuses. They are simply explanations, and explanations are not the same thing as forgiveness. I forgave him eventually. Not for him. For the space it freed up inside me that I needed for other things. The morning after the settlement was signed, I drove Cassie to school. It was an ordinary Wednesday in October, the kind of morning where the phoenix sky is that impossible shade of blue that makes you feel the world is manageable. She was wearing her green backpack and eating a granola bar and telling me about a book her class was reading. She had my eyes and her father's chin and absolutely her own mind, which she had always had. I walked her to the door. She turned back and waved the way she had been waving since she was 4 years old, a small, serious wave with her whole hand. I waved back. I sat in the car for a moment after she disappeared inside. My hands were on the steering wheel. They were thinner than they used to be, still not quite recovered but steady. The treatment was finished. The last scan was clear. The doctors used the word remission in the same tone that Patricia used the word executed when she called to tell me the papers were signed. Calm and precise and exactly what we needed to hear. I thought about the woman in that hotel room in Chicago in 2011, alone at 2 a.m. with a legal pad, writing a clause that no one would find for 12 years. I thought about how tired she was, how careful she was, how she had decided that the only real protection is the kind you build before you need it. I want to be clear about something, because I have told this story to a few people now, and they always ask the same question. They ask if it was worth it. They ask if the planning and the secrecy and the careful architecture of protection was worth what it cost. I did not build that protection because I expected betrayal. I built it because I had experienced it, and I understood that love is not a legal instrument. Love is a choice, renewed daily, and some days people stop choosing. That is their right. But you cannot let someone else's choice to stop determine whether you survive. I built Meridian because I had a daughter and a company, and a body that I knew from experience was not guaranteed to cooperate, and I understood that the only person responsible for the foundation of my life was me. The house in Phoenix is mine. The company is mine. The scans are clear. My daughter ate a granola bar this morning and waved with her whole hand. Some months after the settlement, I was in my office working through a new licensing proposal when my assistant knocked and said I had a call on the general line. An unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail. I picked it up. It was Tara, from Scottsdale. She was careful and formal on the phone, which told me a great deal. She said she wanted me to know that she had ended things with Daniel some time ago. She said she was not calling to explain or to apologize or to seek any kind of absolution. She said she was calling because she had started her own business and she was trying to understand licensing structures, and someone had mentioned my name. I was quiet for a moment. Then I told her I was not taking new clients at the moment, but that I could recommend an attorney who specialized in IP structuring for early-stage companies. I gave her Patricia's number. I do not know if she called. That was the end of the conversation and the last I heard from anyone in that chapter of my life. I want to tell you the last thing, the thing that matters more than the patents and the clauses and the legal architecture I spent 12 years maintaining. The week after the settlement, Cassie and I moved into the townhouse, the one that had been my workspace, the one Daniel's lawyers had dismissed as a consolation prize in their original proposal. It was smaller than the Phoenix house. It had a garden that needed work and a kitchen that smelled of old coffee and a porch that caught the late afternoon light in a way that made everything look golden. We spent a Saturday putting books on shelves. Cassie had a specific system involving color and size that she explained to me with great seriousness. I followed her instructions without question because she was 9 years old and certain, which is a combination worth respecting. That evening, we sat on the porch and she leaned against my shoulder and she asked me if everything was going to be okay. I looked at the garden that needed work. I thought about the patents in the Meridian files. I thought about the clear scan. I thought about the wave with her whole hand every single morning. Yes, I said. Everything is going to be okay. She believed me. This time she was right to. Eleanor's story teaches us that real security is never visible from the outside. It is the quiet work done in hotel rooms at 2 a.m, the clause buried on page 31, the company no one thinks to search for. Greed is always looking at the house. Wisdom is always watching the foundation. The loudest declaration of power in any negotiation is silence, because the person who is truly prepared does not need to announce it. They simply wait for the other side to discover what they failed to read. Build your foundations before the earthquake. Protect what is yours before someone tries to take it. And never mistake a person's patience for their vulnerability, because sometimes the stillest person in the room has already won and is simply giving you the time to figure it out.